For your patience. Sorry, some technical challenges here. Thank you all for attending this special lecture. This is the Department of Internal Medicine Grand Rounds, and today we're focusing our attention on getting started in clinical research. This is a special topic that is geared towards early trainees, early career faculty, residents, and fellows who are looking at taking the leap from maybe a QI project into more formal research, or just trying to figure out how to turn an idea into research fame and fortune. So we have three distinguished lecturers and researchers here from our department who's gonna help us walk through this. So Dr. Richard Sterling is the Assistant Chair of Research for the Department of Internal Medicine, also the Chief Clinical Officer for the Institute of Liver Disease and Metabolic Health. Dr. Patrick Nana-Sinkam is the Professor and Chair in the Division of Pulmonary Disease and Critical Care Medicine, also the newly inaugurated Associate Vice President for Clinical and Translational Research for the Health System. And Dr. Fadi Salloum, who is the Endowed Chair at the VC Pauli Hart Center, Professor of Medicine and Cardiology and Physics and Biophysics, and Associate Chair for Research here in the department. I'm going to invite Dr. Sterling to get us started first, and then we'll turn to a panel discussion after about 30 minutes. Dr. Sterling?
Okay. All right, so, all right. Thank you.
Sorry.
There we go. All right. So I'm going to spend about the next 30 minutes just giving you my take on an introduction to clinical research. It's focused on the Department of Medicine, but it could apply to sort of anybody. And then the plan is to then open it up for some discussions with Fadi and Pat. So this is the group here. And so I think when you're thinking about doing clinical research, I think about multiple steps. And I think when people get frustrated is when they don't either they don't know the steps, they don't take the steps, and they think they can sort of jump to the end. But I think my experience is that if you do this in a sort of more methodical way, you won't get frustrated. And when you're asked to do things, you're not sort of staring from scratch. And Fadi and I are here to help anyone with the process if they need it. So I think if you want to do any kind of research, and we're going to talk about the differences between QI and research, but I think the first, question is, what do you want to study? And that's kind of the idea. And ideas can come from anybody. Most of my ideas actually come from my patients, where are they presenting with a problem, or there's something that I can't figure out what to do or the best way to do it. And most of my research probably comes directly from talking to my patients about how I can try to make their life better. Some things come from reading the literature, and I think, oh, they didn't really do that as well as they could, or maybe we should try that here. So you really need to have an idea. And again, not all ideas need to be novel. It's helpful if they are, but they could be novel here. Next is to determine the type of research. And it's really, do you want to do a QI project, which is really a lot of what people can do, or is it really going to be research? And I'll talk about the distinctions. Who's going to pay for it? And sometimes we do a lot of things that's unfunded, but there are some mechanisms around if you do need money, or you can talk to your chair. There's things through either the Department of Medicine or through the Wright Center or other ways. But a lot of stuff you really don't need, the money to do, but that's an important question. Next is, can you do it? Is it feasible? Do you have the patients to do it? And there are some platforms like Trinetics and others that we can easily look at just to make sure that it's here. If you really want to study a rare disease and we don't really have the patients, then it really might not be feasible to do it here. Can the study be done here? There's a lot of things that we just don't have the infrastructure. It's just not really possible, but we really try not to say no when we really try to figure out a way to try to, make it happen. But that also includes the location. So is it going to be an inpatient or outpatient? If it's going to be an inpatient, is it going to be an ICU study or a study that you can do on the floor? And some specific things can only be done on specific nursing units. And so it's important to figure that out. And there's a process that we have that will help sort that out so that when you start something, it's not going to be destined to failure because you haven't, thought about the feasibility. And really, does it fit into your division's mission? I think this is really clear then to talk to your chair and your chief to make sure that what you want to do aligns with sort of what the mission is. And sometimes the mission has to change. It could be someone else's that you don't know is already doing a similar kind of study and that you can maybe, tag onto with your slant. Next, we're going to talk about the numerous websites that you have to go to in order to try to complete the process. And often people get frustrated because they don't know all the things that now we have to do in order to do research. And so I think I will provide you with the specific websites for that. And then what resources are available. Resources could be money, it could be people, could be a coordinator, could be anything that you need to do for the success of your study. And are you going to need support? And if you do, where is that really going to come from? Do you need a research coordinator? Are you going to be that person? Do you need someone to help enter the data? Are you going to do something where you need, you want to do something with biospecimens? Do you want to do a test kit? So whatever that needs, it needs to be clearly thought out, because if you don't plan that out ahead of time, then obviously your study won't be successful. And then if you're new to research, is there someone that you can have to help you? So I think mentorship really helped me along the way, and Fadi and I are here to help you if you don't have that within your own department. And then, of course, everybody, before you even think about doing research, you have to be properly trained. And at least here, the main thing you need to do is have your city training, which I think is mandatory for all the house staff, I think, have to do that. Is that correct? Yeah. And it's for all the faculty. Sometimes even new faculty are coming on have to make sure that their city training is specific to VCU. The VA will accept a lot of our city training, but there are some unique modules if your research is going to be out at the VA. So this is just before you even get started, some of the simple things you need to have in your mind. So let's first talk about the idea. And the idea is really, what's the research question? And you really should be pretty clear. The more vague you are, the less impactful. And that really also comes with looking at the literature, knowing what else has been done, and trying to make sure that your research idea is really finely tuned. And for us who put in grants, we spend most of our time trying to develop that first page that we then send around to people to review, that really understands why this idea is important, why we want to do this. And so I think really talking to people and making sure your research question is clear. Again, you should have a hypothesis. It's what you really think is going to happen, and you really kind of gives you the direction and your roadmap of what you're doing. And again, that's where you can bounce things off of colleagues or other people to make sure that hypothesis is clear. And then the specific aims is what you're going to do to prove or test that hypothesis, whether it's works out or doesn't work out. Your specific aims ought to be really clear. And for those of us who put in grants and studies, we spend a lot of time. Most of the time is actually on this first page, trying to make sure that our question is clear, that our hypothesis is clear, and what are we going to do to try to prove it. And then next is this novel or innovative? Because if it's not, then that's okay. I mean, doesn't mean the research can't be done. It may be novel here for our patient population, but it's kind of hard to find something that's truly innovative. But I think you need to ask them, because if you're just reproducing something and it's not really going to help anything, it's just a curiosity, then you really have to decide you want to really invest all the time and effort. Now, QI projects are a little different, because QI projects really don't need to be novel or innovative. QI projects, as we'll talk about, is looking at existing literature. You're not trying to develop new knowledge. And that's one of the big differences between QI projects and research. And so that's fine, but that's going to take you down a different path, and you're going to have to do slightly different things, much less things if you want to do a QI. But some QI turns into research, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so where do you start? So you have an idea, and then you decide, is it going to be QI or research? And if it's research, what kind? Is it investigator initiated, which is what we do a lot of? Is it going to be something with an industry partner or a pharmaceutical company? Or are you going to try to get funding from either the NIH or from some kind of society? And how you develop your protocol may depend on which of these three different sort of buckets that your research might fall into. So I want to talk a little bit about QI, and we gave this talk, I think, a couple of years ago, Georgia McIntosh and I. And really, when you talk about what is QI, QI is a standardized process and structure. And what we try to do QI is to reduce the variation of how we treat patients and what we do. We want to achieve predictable results, and we want to improve the outcomes for patients, the healthcare system, and our organization. But really what QI is, it's an application of known knowledge. So if your question, if you think you're going to be providing something new and different, that's research. If you're testing and want to show what we already have, does it work here, that really could be QI. And QI really is no additional risk to the patients whatsoever. So it's applying standard of care, and you just want to see how that works. And that's a lot of things. And you can do that on any clinic, any nursing unit, and it doesn't necessarily need to be novel. Again, what QI does is it helps to bridge the gap between what we know and what we practice. And are we really, practicing? Are we adhering to guidelines? And you want to make sure of that. And there's just so many things that you can think about. So when we try to differentiate it again, QI is really addresses the need of your local situation, whether it be your clinic or the ward or the team that you work on. And it's really using data-driven methods to improve the process of healthcare delivery and the quality. Research, on the other hand, is systematic investigation, and it involves problems that are more generalizable. It could be to develop new knowledge, and it's with the intent that whatever you find, you're going to share outside of the institution. So that's really key. But QI and research sometimes can be very, very similar, and there's no reason that a QI project can't also be research. But it is research when you're trying to test an intervention that's not the standard of care, even though it might be available. It involves individual subjects and not just sort of people that happen to be there for their regular care. If anytime you're randomizing or blinding, anytime you have additional risk, or anytime the results again are generalizable, that really might be research. So you may start off with something that you think is QI, but then which you don't have to submit to the IRB, then it ends up being research, which you do need to submit to the IRB. So there are, then the question is, what don't you need to submit to the IRB? And so anything that's an established educational practice, tests or surveys, if you're using de-identified data or biospecimens, which is a lot of things that we do, but if it's retrospective and you want to collect, data, and then we'll talk a little bit about the end about using the honest broker and all these new requirements that we have to do, even to get Trinetics data or EPIC data. Some things do require an IRB. If it's a public benefit or service or program evaluations, and then things like taste or food quality studies, that doesn't need to go to the IRB. Again, in the past, if you're just doing a record review to generate de-identified data, that used to not have to go to the IRB, but now that's evolving where they want you to go through this honor broker system. You may not have to go to the IRB, but informatics is not going to provide that information to you unless you have it. And then what we call non-human subjects research, which could be a research done on human subjects, but if it doesn't provide any a PHI at all, and there's no way to link, or it's aggregate data. For example, I've done studies with Trinetics where it's 1,000 people and there's no way that you can tell, and the ages are such that they either round up or they round down, so no one would even be able to know who was in that. A lot of that would be called non-human subjects research. Case reports are also considered non-human subjects research that don't require an IRB. So how do you decide? Well, again, if it's going to be generalizable knowledge, that is research. If you're going to use the PDSA cycle of QI, then that is going to be a QI project, and you're only going to look at the data at the end. That might be research. Will the project change your local practice? Again, that could be QI. Will it improve it? That could be QI. Are you going to do an intervention? That's research. If there's funding, that's research. If there's new data, that's research. And if there's any risk to the patients, that's a research. But again, if you don't know, you need to ask. And sometimes the IRB will need to make that determination. So again, this is just a table that I included. So when you have the slides, it gives a little bit, difference between QI and research. Just sort of look at that. We've already sort of talked about that. All right, so now you've got an idea, you've decided what is going to be QI and research, and now you say, okay, I'm gonna, go forward. So what are the nuts and bolts about how do you actually do it? And that's what we're going to spend at least the rest of my time on. So this is what we have for the Protocol Review Oversight Committee, or the PROC, and everyone says, why the heck do we need to have a PROC? And the reason that the PROCs were put in place is because there are many investigators who were trying to do research and their research was never happening. And it was because we didn't have the patient populations, because they just thought they wanted to do it and they didn't check. They didn't have the resources. They thought a coordinator would just magically appear to help them, or someone would magically put in all their data. They would just have an idea and they say, call me when the data is ready and the manuscript is written. And there's a lot of stuff that has to happen in between. There were individuals who were trying to do studies that the health system required, that what their intervention had to be in the ICU, but they thought that they could do the study on the floor, or they didn't really have the resources. So this was put in place, and it's there also as a requirement for both the IRB and the Wright Center. And so it's a pretty simple process, and the turnaround time is supposed to be less than a week. We currently have 5 PROCs, one for cardiology, one for hepatology and GI, 2 others that are a little more of a mixed bag. And then we have a specific now, a QI PROC. Massey Cancer Center has their own, PROC. The CHOR has their own PROC. So there's a lot of these which are out there. And when you go to the site, they will ask you what you're submitting to. So it makes sure it goes to the right reviewers. The scientific reviewer should be one of your peers, and they basically are there just to make sure that it sort of passes the smell test. When I do these, I pretty much already know about the projects, but you just want to make sure, this kind of makes sense. There's an operations review, and then there's a facilities review, just to make sure that we can do what you want to do. And often it turns out that we just need to do a little homework and try to get you what the resources that you need so your project can be successful. Usually people get an approval, in which case you'll get an email back from Mary Harmon, and she basically says that's what you can use that document to submit to the IRB. If there's some questions that someone says, do you really think, I'm not sure you can do what you want to do, where you want to do it, then there's a discussion about how we can help you to overcome that barrier. And then once you have your PROC approval, which again should happen pretty quickly, then you're ready to go ahead and probably submit to the IRB. And I'll give you that website in a minute. And what you're going to need on the website is you're going to need a protocol, and you're probably going to need this for the PROC also. So it's not just any old protocol. Now there's a form, the 503A form, which you can download from the site. And it's templated to make the IRB reviewers know where everything is in your protocol, so they don't have to kind of try to find it. So even if I'm doing an investigator initiated or industry or NIH, I then have to take what I'm given and get it into the protocol for them. I usually submit the whole, protocol anyway that was given to me, but a lot of times it's cutting and pasting the basics into this form so you can understand. So it makes it easier for the reviewers to understand what you're trying to do. If there's a contract needed, and often you can do contracting and a regulatory in parallel, so you're not wasting a lot of time. And then, of course, if you need a budget, then you may need some help from the School of Medicine to do something called a coverage analysis, where they make sure that if it's going to be patients that are in Medicare or Medicaid, then there's a form that they have to complete. And usually if you get them the paperwork, I usually get the form back from them within just a couple days, just to make sure that what you're doing is not going to ruffle any regulatory feathers. And then you would submit other information, just gets uploaded to the site. When you do get ready to submit to the IRB, Everything that's not mine, because mine goes to Fadi, but everything else in the Department of Medicine comes to me. Normally, I can try to get those turnaround time. Often it's within the same day, if not within the same hour, if I have to be sitting at my desk. And I'm just looking to see, I don't read the protocol in depth. That's the IRB's responsibility. I'm hoping that, it's gone through the proc. So I want to make sure that there's a protocol there, there's a consent, there's your city training, because the IRB is going to want that. Your certificate, there's your bio sketch, and that things are on the appropriate forms. And so if not, I may send it back to you, because that's just going to save time with the IRB if you have all your documents there. So we're trying to speed that along, but usually I can approve things pretty quickly. And most of the stuff I'm seeing is pretty good, but sometimes I will call you and say, the IRB is not going to take this because you're missing, a few documents. And so if you just resubmit them, but again, send all those, list me as the reviewer. If you list Pat as the reviewer, if you're in pulmonary, he is just going to end up telling you to resubmit it to me, and that just takes more time. All right. So I think when you're doing research, I always think about how am I going to collect the data, and I'm thinking what my tables and figures are going to eventually look like, and that's going to help to tell me the type of data and the way I'm going to collect it. So you should be pretty thoughtful on what you want to collect, and you really, you have to balance. We've all done studies where we get at the end and we're all there and we're like, oh crap, I forgot to collect that. Now I have to go back in and I have to try to do that. And that's a lot of extra work. On the other hand, a lot of people collect way too much. There's no way they're ever going to use it. There's no plan to use it. They just want to avoid having to go back. So you have to kind of balance that, but it's a lot of work for everybody to collect stuff that you're never going to need. Again, be complete, because you don't want to have to go back and do it again. You have to decide who's going to collect the data. Is it going to be you? Is it going to be a coordinator? Is it going to be a house staff, a student? Are you going to try to get the data from Epic through the honest broker system, which we're beginning to do more and more? So you need to be thinking about who's going to do that. That is just not going to magically appear. You need to think about what you're going to do with it again, and if you're going to analyze it and how. And to me, that's also need to be very thoughtful about that, because if you're going to, you want the data to be numerical, and you're going to do, sums and averages and means and all those other things. And you want to know if your data is normally distributed, then that's fine. Collect numerical data, but categorical data is also nice, whether it's men or women or different races, where you can do different analysis kind of, based on category. And sometimes you may need to think, well, it could be numerical, but I think I kind of want to lump it up. For example, BMI, I could collect it as a numerical value, but I could also collect it. In addition to that, I could categorize my patients as being normal weight, overweight, or obese, or super obese, because we know that I want to look at that eventually. And you're better off trying to collect that and think about that ahead of time as you're entering in the data. Then you have to think about how your data is going to be stored, because that's also what the IRB is going to want to know. They want to know that it's going to be protected, and that we don't, want to be in the paper of having a breach where all of a sudden patient information is out there. And so REDCap is really a great way to do that. It's secure. You control who has access to your particular project. The databases are really actually pretty easy to set up. I actually think they're fun to do. And so I've helped other people set up their REDCap databases. It's actually pretty easy to do. You just need an EID. Important to know if you're going to need help in analyzing your data. And so there are people who seem to be very, very good at it, and they're very, facile with the different programs. There are people who think they know what they're doing, but don't, and it's clear when you look at their analysis plan. And there are people who this isn't my thing, I really need help, and this is what you do. So the Department of Medicine has a Dr. Lee Kang, as well as Matthew, who's a master's level biostatistician. They're on Dr. Syme's payroll. They're there to help you. And so if you need help, those are two easy resources that you can tap into. And of course, the Wright Center has good biotechnical support. And so often I send people there. Sometimes they'll do things if it's easy. Sometimes it may cost, money for their services if it's super expensive or extensive analysis. If your protocol in your research study looks like it's going to be kind of complicated, I would definitely involve a biostatistician early on, particularly if you just need some advice on how to do all the things I've already talked about. This is what they do, this is what they live for, and even if you're not necessarily going to use them, it's helpful to develop a relationship with one or two of them so you sort of know what you're doing. They're not doctors, they're not clinicians, and so some of them are pretty good, and sometimes you really have to explain what you're trying to do. But once they know your diseases, then when you go back to them, they kind of get the hang of it. They need scholarship also, so offering them authorship on your project is often one way to engage them into the research. And of course, ultimately, if you end up getting funding and you can support a biostatistician for effort, then that's really even better. Okay, what about house staff? And there's pluses and minuses. I work with house staff a lot, and so the advantages are they definitely help in collecting the data. They help in entering the data. It's helped me a lot to become a mentor because it's nice to see them have some success, and it gives them lots of opportunities, particularly with students who want to get into competitive residencies, residents who want to get into competitive fellowships, and of course the fellows that I have who want to go on to have an academic career. So there's a lot of positives. However, not everything is rosy, and I think the disadvantages is that now you're a mentor. And that comes with responsibility. You can't just completely, blow them off. And a lot of times, even though you may not think you know a lot, they know probably less. Some of them occasionally know more if they've had, training before they got to where they are. But you need to take that responsibility seriously. You need to share the glory. A lot of the stuff I do, I'm putting students and, house staff as the first author. And so there's a lot of rewards. Sometimes I'm, second or third because the other ones, and then sometimes I'm last. But you should have that discussion early on. Trainees have a life, particularly house staff, and sometimes that's a little frustrating for me. I have to remember that I want this done yesterday, but they're rotating at the VA, or there are nights, or they're at the ICU. So it's important to know what their life and their schedule is. Make sure that they're committed to the project, but they have another job and they're doing this, for fun or for their education. And so you need to be respectful of that. And usually I think it can work out pretty well. Sometimes I have to be patient and kind of wait for them to kind of do their work and then wait until they have a break to be able to do the research. And trainees may be less what? I can't remember what I wanted to say here. Remember what I wanted to say? Fadi, less something. I don't know. Less excited. Maybe less. I don't know. Must have been tired when I put these together. Maybe less. I don't know. They may be more too. So it could be in advance. I don't know. Maybe I meant less engaged in the process, less vested in the process. If it's your project and you're just basically using them as worker bees to get the data entered, they may be less sort of engaged and interested in trying to get to the outcome. I think that's what I meant. All right, so you've got your project, you figured it out, you have an idea, it's clearly thought out, your hypothesis is clear, your aims couldn't be clear, what you're going to do with your data, how you're going to analyze the data, you're ready to go, you're all excited. So now you're like, okay, now I got to submit to the IRB. So you go to the VCU, IRB website, and you scroll down and you click it, and then, you start to break out to a sweat, and then everything else becomes, now, I forgot, I got to go, walk the dog. So again, you should have it on the right protocol, or the IRB may send it back to you. And so that's, you don't want to waste any time. And so again, it's a template, the 503A template. And you should have that done probably when you submit to the procs, and when you're ready to submit to the IRB, all your documents are there, and probably keep them in a separate folder on your computer. So it's very easy, where to go to try to find them. There's a templated consent that you can get from the IRB. It's all there. It's got most of the language that you need. You just have to follow it and complete it out. Again, you already have your PROC approval because you submitted the protocol to them with what resources that you think you're going to need. You may need to do an informatics request now, which seems to be common for any time you want to use health system data through this honest broker system. And so there's a way to go into the informatics VCU site, and you basically fill out the request, and it's pretty clear how to do that. If you're doing sponsored research, there's probably going to be an investigator brochure. Again, you're going to want to put your CV or biosketch in your city training. And when I look at the documents to approve it, those are all the individual things. I don't open them up. But if I see a folder in there that's labeled these things, then you're good to go. And I'm not going to be the holdup. Again, list me as the approver, please. That will speed things along. Sometimes they could sit in Dr. Syme's because she's busy and she's, running the department and she doesn't realize that she's supposed to be the approver. And then weeks go by and you're like, why isn't my study even off to the IRB yet? It's because you sent it to the wrong person. Again, it's important to look. The IRB is almost invariably going to come back to you with something, even though you thought you did everything perfectly. My studies, I don't think I've ever had one get through the IRB the first time. But often what I hear is that, what's the problem? And I'm like, well, according to the records, the IRB sent you something 4 weeks ago and they asked you to make a change and you didn't do it. So it's on you. And it's fairly simple. Sometimes I have to actually call the IRB. I said, I don't understand what you want me to do. This doesn't make any sense to me. And they can walk you through it. Often they will give you the suggested language. So what I've learned, which much as life and with my wife, is don't argue, just do it. You may think you could do it, right or better, or they don't know what they're talking about. But as long as it doesn't really change the study, I just usually do what they say. If it's really, no, this is completely wrong, I don't understand any of this, you're misinterpreting, then you need to make sure you're clear. And that's when I usually reach out to the IRB and talk to one of the reviewers, one of the intake staff, to make sure that they understand what I meant. And if I wasn't clear, then often I can just fix what I did and then go, okay, now I understand this. And again, if you're using an outside IRB because it's multi-center, then often there's going to be a reliance agreement between our IRB and the other institution that allows the other IRB to be the IRB of record. You still need to submit it to our IRB, but it's as long as they have a reliance agreement, the other IRB's approval will be okay, and then they'll give you the go-ahead. You still need to go through our IRB before you start. So before submitting, again, the city training, again, when you're just starting out, it can be pretty daunting. So just plan for a couple of hours to get it all done and don't get, frustrated. And then also we worry about conflict of interest forms, particularly if you're doing industry-sponsored research. They want to make sure that you don't, again, end up on the front page of the newspaper that you did a study, but you're also being paid by the company. There is the Conflict of Interest Committee for the university, which I also sit on. There are some interesting things that come up, particularly with investigators who have spun off companies, or they want to use their thing that they invented to do their research here, which is okay. But there's a process to make sure that the study will be done with integrity, and that, again, there's going to be no way anybody would question you. So a lot of times, what we do is we're there to protect the investigator, and it's fairly simple, but I list the websites there. All right. So again, this is, you go to the webpage for the IRB, which I've listed there. And again, if you don't know what to do and you're like, I'm really not sure where I'm supposed to start, there is a schedule a consultation button and someone will walk you through the whole process. So they really are there to help you do the research. They kind of get a bad rap. It's because they're there to make sure everything is going to be done, properly, and they're going to protect the rights of the human subjects and make sure the university doesn't get into trouble, make sure you don't get into trouble. There have been investigators who have gotten into trouble, and they're there to sort of help make sure that doesn't happen. So embrace them. The SMART form, again, this is a site from the website. So this is just an example, but again, you just click the start a new study and it basically walks you through all the steps. And then there's a place for you to upload those documents, which you now have saved and kind of ready to go. And I have gone from, starting a study actually to getting IRB approval in less than 2 weeks. You'd think like it was, record pace speed, but I had everything ready to go. And so I didn't have to start from scratch because I knew what they're going to want. So I gave them everything that they wanted. Still didn't go perfect because they thought I was trying to do something when I thought I was going to do something else. And so sometimes there was a little bit there, but this is the site. All right. Okay, so what else do you need to think about? And again, it seems like every time we turn around, there's a new requirement. And so you need to ask yourself, is the data going to be sensitive? And again, this is the website where you would go to, and there's just a series of questions and things that they're going to want to know. How are you going to collect the data? Who's going to access the data? Where's the data going to be stored? And you need to go through this process. You need to have a data management plan because you need to make sure the data is, again, not going to be accessible to anyone outside the health system or the university that you don't want to. There's a website for that. If you're going to be using radiation, x-rays, or anything, then you need to make sure you have a radiation safety plan in place. And there's obviously a website for that. So again, this is just a summary, which I think we're going to have these slides available, right, Christian?
Yep.
So again, this is everything you need to know. And it's just the TEFL. As far as I know, then no other document has all this. I think I talked to my coordinators, and some coordinators have some, and they go, oh, well, I have to go to that coordinator. So I tried to reach everyone I could to try to come up with sort of a 1-2 how to go to site. So this is everything you need to know. And I think we are again now moving again. We talked about having a good mentor. So I think that's really important, particularly if you're young and you're trying to do research. I've been fortunate in my life to have several great mentors. Some are at VCU, some are outside. So what is a mentor? A mentor is a person who takes interest in and helps the less experienced colleague develop professionally through a combination of advising on projects, skills development, creation of opportunities for personal growth. You can have mentors that are life mentors. You can have mentors that help you with your clinical work, and then you can have mentors that help you with your research. The benefits of having a good, being a good mentor is, again, mentors are the ones who help you get the job done to help advance your career and provide you with some personal support to achieve your goals. But it is definitely a two-way street. So what are the expectations? So again, for me, I need to, help choose the right, project. I think, you want to balance high and low risk a project. So you've got a ton of ideas. Sometimes you have to focus. Even this week, Dr. Senyal keeps, using that word, focus, focus, focus. I think that's important when you're young in your research career, but as you get a little bit more mature, you can begin to branch out a little bit. Make sure that the project fits the time frame of what you're trying to do, and make sure that it fits in the divisional mission. Sometimes you may need some additional coursework or techniques that will help your skills and do that, and your mentor can help you get those. You should be meeting them on some sort of regular basis to go over your project. And really, the mentors are also there to encourage and critique. Nothing is perfect the first time. And sometimes when you're getting a little frustrated, the mentor can help sort of redirect you in the right direction. So sort of like being a good parent in a lot of ways. What are the expectations? And so they're to advise you on maybe opportunities for funding, give you timely feedback, particularly grants. And so again, there's a lot of great people that would be good mentors, but if they don't have the time to commit to you, then you might need to pick someone else to help you on your mentoring team. Again, assigning credit. So again, you should be the first author on your projects. And sometimes you need to be completely separate from your mentor. I know for me, it was very hard. My first paper, when I went to Dr. Senyal and said, I'm not going to put you on this because I need to show my independence from you. And I don't want everybody to think what I'm doing is what you're doing. And he, of course, was very fine with that. So again, I think it's to push the mentee to develop their own research agenda. You don't want to be doing everything like your mentor. And then to counsel for job opportunities and other things that might need. What are your responsibilities? Well, it's to articulate your career goals. You really sort of have to decide what you want to be. You can create your research mentorship. And I think having a mentorship network is important because not one person is going to be able to satisfy everything that you need to do. You need to be responsive to the mentor's feedback, but also be clear about your concerns and be able to communicate them. And so I think having that two-way conversation is important. Be flexible. And as I mentioned, focus, 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 particularly if you really want to have an academic career. So what are the challenges? Well, there's always problems with the pathways to independence. And again, authorship considerations, you need to think about that, particularly when you're working with trainees. I was speaking to someone yesterday. I was in New York at Mount Sinai, and actually one of their younger faculty who I was assigned to by my society, sort of this, one-on-one, somehow I got paired with her, and we sort of lost touch, and she's been out now for about 6 or 7 years. And luckily she got a K and she got an R01 at the same time because her K funding was really delayed. She didn't think she was going to get it. But her problem was she has all these projects and she has all these people working on it, and she just didn't know what to do about authorship for some of her projects. And she didn't feel comfortable talking to her boss there. So she said, oh, here's someone I knew from years ago. And so we actually spent a lot of time talking about how she should try to navigate that. Sometimes you're the junior investigator within a large research group, and you need to sort of try to carve out your territory. Your primary mentor, I put down outside of hepatology for me, but your mentor could be anyone on the faculty that can provide you with some content. When I had my K, my mentorships included people outside of my division and included people like Wally Smith and others who sort of helped me to carve out my career. And then in some instances, again, you may need to do this long distance, and that's where you might meet someone at a national meeting or something, and often people are more than happy to provide you with some long distance mentorship as long as they have the time for it. So again, it's definitely a two-way street between you and your mentor. So what do we do here in the Department of Medicine? Well, we provide one-on-one mentoring that Fadi and I do. If you want to meet with us, we usually do it late in the afternoon in the faculty lounge over coffee or tea. You can set up mentoring teams. Your mentors, or what we can do, we can help review your protocols. We can help link you with health system resources. And if you're going to do an inpatient study, the key person that you want to meet is Shelley Orr, and she is a scientist within the School of Nursing, and she's over on North 8, and she can help you with try to get what you want to done if you're trying to do an inpatient study. And then Mary Harmon is also instrumental and works with Pat through the health system, and she can also help you to try to get some research done. There's something that we're trying to get going. It was initially nicknamed Peons to PI, but somebody in the audience didn't like that. So we decided to change it to PI Training Tools or Pit Stop, because we know Dr. Syme loves NASCAR, and maybe she'll show you her lug nut that she has in her office. And so we're trying to develop these tools and educational resources so that you can go and you can learn about all the things that we talked about. And right now we're putting together everybody's talks that we can find, from regulatory to, how to write, grants and papers, how to read the literature, how to do, statistics, and all that other stuff. Again, we do have increased biostatistical support that I mentioned, and we also have a grant writer within the department, Marie, and she can help you with your papers, and she can help you with grants and providing some of the information that you might need, the facilities page, all this other stuff that you have to put in for a grant. We have templates and stuff for all that available, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and she can help you to modify it. So she's there to help you. As far as I know, she's still not overworked. We'd like to make her overworked. And so, so she can help review papers to make sure that, they read well, or help you maybe cut down on your word count. All right, so now just to finish up, we talked about if it's a QI project, then you want to know where you're going to do it. You have to have a protocol. You want to use the PDSA cycle for plan, do something, act. Yeah, study, act, see, and people who do QI. And there is a special QI proc that meets to make sure that, it's also to look and see. So if you're doing something on one unit, eventually we'll know if it's, you can do it on another unit, that's fine. But then we can tell you, oh, someone's kind of doing that. You may want to talk to them so you don't have to start from scratch. If it's investigator initiated, you can see all the things that you need to have thought about. And we talked about all these things already. If it's industry, then you may need to do a little bit more versus NIH. So again, the resources that we have, we've already talked about within the Department of Medicine. There's resources within the Wright Center that we encourage you to look at. And then sometimes you need to use resources within the School of Medicine, particularly if you get asked to do a study from a company, you have to have a CDA first before a confidentiality agreement before they even send you it, and they need to sign those. That's a legal document between the health system and the company. That's not something you should be signing, but you can usually get that turned around very, very quickly. They help you with contracts. We talked about coverage analysis to make sure that you can bill or not bill for the things that don't get you into trouble, and they can help you to develop your budgets. So again, my keys to success is have a plan, have a mentor, have your forms ready to go, include a biostatistician in informatics early on so you don't get frustrated. Look for those emails back from the IRB because you are going to have to make changes, and usually just set aside a little bit of time and go through each one, and just usually I do what they tell me to do. Be engaged. Try to set up your research team for success. Have the support that you need, which could be personnel or it could be money. Ask for help and be patient. So again, you start with your research question, you develop your hypothesis and aims, and then you sort of go through this particular roadmap until you get to the end, which is your data and your manuscript, hopefully, and then you get your fame and your fortune. So I will stop, and we have about 15 minutes for questions from the group.
Thanks.
Took longer than I thought.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sterling. Great chance to be able to do it. We'll start with some questions here from the audience, and then we can take.
Yeah,
go ahead,
young lady.
Are there any resources or experts in the department for qualitative research? And do you know if Marie Kreck has worked in helping write in qualitative research at all?
So I would say yes, there are. There are people within the Wright Center who do a lot of things with qualitative research. So quantitative is kind of, numbers, and that's sort of what we think about. But there's a lot of research related to surveys and there are people within the Wright Center. So that can help you to do that. So it's I would look for them and hook up. I can give you emails if specifically. Okay. Of my garage door opening or closing.
Other comments from the audience, questions?
Or the outside, we're here. So Fadi, Pat, you want to say something?
So,
Yeah.
I just want to make a kind of a comment and a suggestion. We recognize, well, first of all, it's a fantastic talk and there's a lot of information there. We recognize that the majority of house staff as well as early career faculty are probably not going to write a case.
Oh, come up here.
Sure. Yeah. So what I was going to say is that, we recognize that the majority of house staff and early career faculty are probably not going to write a K, and they're probably not going to necessarily want to be the PI on a clinical trial, but they may have interest in what I like to say, using the clinic as their laboratory, right? And that means accessing the information that's in the electronic medical record, where there's a wealth of information. It can really help you ask and answer questions. I suspect if you were to take a poll of house staff who are interested in research or might be interested in research, that would probably be one of the first places they want to start. How do I get into electronic medical record? How do I ensure that I'm not breaching confidentiality? How do I ask a question? How do I answer a question? So one of the things that I'm going to suggest is that we develop a workflow for that specific type of research, if we don't have one already. Because I suspect that that's probably the first place that many residents are going to gravitate. They're going to say, I just want to ask and answer a question, right? And so that will, in my mind, will cut through some of what you have here, because there is a lot here to take in, particularly for the uninitiated. But that will likely cut through all of that and just say, here's a workflow to just do this type of research. Because I think that's probably going to be one of the more popular avenues, just to get people to catch what I call the research bug. Sometimes that's kind of where you have to start. So I just wanted to make that comment.
And there are mechanisms through, for example, informatics, that they can extract data from Epic in a way that's going to be helpful. So you don't have to do it like by hand. You know, Trinetics is sort of a different platform, but Trinetics is also based on diagnoses, which is sort of depends on who's putting in the diagnosis at the time of the visit. And it's not quite as accurate as I would like, but it's good for, big studies. And I've done national data sets using the Trinetics platform. Epic has this tool called Slicer Dicer, but you really shouldn't be going in and trying to extract stuff without understanding what you're doing and getting permission to do it, because you just want to make sure that you're protecting patients and their rights, and that we're not breaching any laws. And I think there's a lot of ongoing efforts to try to make that process a little bit simpler based on sort of new regulations that seem to come about every day.
Yeah, along those lines, one of the things that we are really committed to within the health system is just making it a lot easier to access data within the electronic medical record and making sure that we're not compromising PHI. That has been, I think, a bit of an Achilles heel and a bit of a thorn in the side. It's just, how do I get to the data and not, breach confidentiality, et cetera. And it has in the past been, quite frankly, fairly cumbersome to do that. But I can assure you that there's a commitment to actually making this as streamlined as we possibly can. We don't want to make research is hard to begin with. We don't want to make it any harder than it needs to be. And some of the easier paths in research, the last thing we want to do is take something that's supposed to be relatively easy and make it harder. That's obviously what we do not want to do. So I think you want to say something.
One question. Go ahead, Fadi.
We'll make sure to get to everybody.
My question is, and I came in a few minutes late, so it may have been addressed at the very beginning, but how are you all using or beginning to think about using language learning models and AI in terms of abstract writing, case studies, grant writing, and is there any additional aspect that we need to be thinking about when using like ChatGPT and things like that as part of our research practice?
So that's a great question. I'm actually very glad you asked it. So there are mechanisms now through the CTSA where they have people that can extract data from the record using natural language processing, and I've used that a little bit, but it does require much more effort. There is a prior faculty graduate who has a big interest in this exact particular question, and I think hopefully we will have separate pilot funding for someone who wants to do this, and I think we're planning on him. Dr. Hoyt is coming
Sometime in the fall.
Sometime in the fall. So he's gonna have someone who, this is what he does. He writes books on this, and he's volunteered. He's volunteered to support the research for this. So we're all excited about that. This is sort of ongoing. So for that, we plan on having him come give a grand rounds, or either in person or virtually. And then also we've asked him to do a workshop where people bring their ideas, and he actually sits and helps people actually get the stuff done. So that'll be a new initiative for us that we've been working on.
Yes, more to come on that.
Okay.
And just one last comment I would like to add to remind especially house staff, in addition to all the wonderful clinical research that's taking place in the department, we have a fair amount of teaching and research faculty who do basic translational research. And while a lot of people think this necessitates you spending a lot of time in a laboratory setting, it's not always the case. There's a lot of opportunities to use patient samples and try to address a question that you're interested in with the help of folks in the lab. So we're available to answer any questions. Always, please feel free to reach out to us. There's tons of opportunities, especially for those who have some background in basic or translational research. there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of funded research within our department that you can also benefit from. And of course, PIs understand the schedule and the clinical duties that our house staff have and are happy to work around that. So any interest at all, reach out to either Dr. Sterling or myself for such opportunities.
And it's not just us. And so we've been doing these sort of mini retreats to try to increase collaboration. And I think, house staff and I've personally collaborated. So I have had collaborations with the School of Pharmacy, and there's people there who do health outcomes research and can do stuff related to, is this drug really worth it? And there's a faculty there who's very interested in working with us. I've worked with the School of Nursing. We have an upcoming research retreat next month with the Department of Surgery, try to figure out more collaborative ways there. So, research is really team science, and it's really trying to get the best players on your team and being sort of, flexible and reaching out to these other groups, because everybody wants to do it, but we're trying to break down the silos. And again, I think if you want to do research at the VA, there are mechanisms to do that. They have access to things that we don't have. And so certainly it's a different patient population, but there are, folks over there, and they have people that do sort of big data science. And so you may be able to get access to their data warehouse and look at the entire VA population for your question. So I think there's just tons of opportunities.
Quick question, and we'll end with this question. I think coming from the perspective of early career faculty, I just want to get your comments on the importance of meeting with a senior mentor early on to define the scope of your project, the timeline, and for those that are busy clinicians and you're 100% clinical, what's the strategy over the next 1, 2, 3 years to work on that? I think a lot of people get tied up, just like the residents. A lot of early career faculty are quite busy in the clinics, in the wards, and it's not something that automatically comes in 3 months that you will have freed up time. It takes time and effort. And so I don't know if you want to comment on that, meeting with a mentor, defining that scope and timeline would be helpful.
Yeah, a lot of times the younger faculty are the ones who are doing more work on the wards and in the clinics, and you may, have a great time with them, and you think that they're great, they're a great clinician, and you really would like to do some research with them. They can be on the mentoring team, but you need to make sure that you don't need perhaps somebody more senior who can help sort of guide the overall process and make sure that everyone, I still have my mentors, even at this point in my career, that I still, kind of reach out to, and they, I have to accept if they tell me I need to, go a little this way or a little that way with something I'm trying to do. I have to be flexible. So I think it is important to identify the mentor. Again, you want to make sure they have the time to be able to commit to you, and they need to be honest with you about that. And it does take a time commitment. So there could be content mentors, and there could be overall people who have sort of more experience and can maybe look at it more from sort of the 30,000-foot view rather than sort of boots on the ground. And that kind of helps with the mentoring team.
Thanks.
All right, Dr. Sam, you want to come off and give the final words?
Final words.
Yeah.
The final frontier.
Or Christian,
Final
this is
words.
the hook.
No, so I wanted just to take a moment to offer congratulations to Pat Nana-Sinkam on his role in the health system and helping us define and execute clinical research. And then also Fadi Salloum in his role as interim chair of one of the basic science departments. I think having our own faculty and research leadership roles is really important. And remember that within the department, we have 3 of the big research centers. We have Poly, we have Massey, we have the Liver Institute. So we really are very well positioned to do team science. And I think anyone that really wants to be a part of that, we really, really want to make that part of our mission in the department. So we do want to get rid of the barriers that just make it that little bit harder to do research, whether it's basic or clinical, whether it's quantitative, qualitative. We really are trying to put in as much infrastructure as we can to help you, because we know you're all busy. Nobody's getting any less busy clinically, but we want to make that an opportunity for you to have that as part of your life and your career if you would like it. Thanks for everything.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you.
All right, well, okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.